Talktainment Radio Worldwide Sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Well, good morning. You are listening to the greatest station in the nation across the World Wide Web. That's right, TalkTainmentRadio.com. The world's greatest radio. You are in touch with the compensatory concept. I am Mr. Bobby, and this is radio the way it should be heard. That compensatory concept is with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., who has written books on this subject, done his research, and he is on the line with me live from Washington, D.C. And as we traditionally say, good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
And how does this day, the only day of the year where you have orders, which is March 4th, how are you doing today?
I'm still learning.
You are still learning. And what are you learning today?
Well, I'm learning the situation is still the same as it's been for some time, and with no substantial change, no fundamental change, which I think is needed. I think people, all people throughout the world, should be fundamentally changing.
Yes, sir.
Changing from what? From what they are to what they should be. Now it comes down to a question of question mark. What should we be? We should be the very best of what we can be in every area of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. We're nowhere close to that. None of the people on the planet are anywhere close to that. So that means that there's a problem here. And that problem is, what's holding it up? So I came to the conclusion some time ago that the biggest problem is the problem of racism. Now, racism is a form of royalism, however, which means the holier-than-thou concept, one person looking at another person and saying, I'm better than you are. Therefore, I have the right or the privilege or the duty to dominate you and mistreat you based on how I feel from moment to moment. Now, that's an old royalist idea. The king can do no wrong. The emperor is always right. But when it was put on a color basis, it became the most powerful idea, political idea, and religious idea ever thought up. According to what? According to Neely Fuller, Jr.? No, according to the evidence. So that's what we're wrestling with now. And that's the philosophy that dominates the entire world. And everybody has been poisoned by it. There's been no one who has escaped that. Everyone.
Okay. If you would like to get in contact with the show, you may do so by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you could email me, or actually Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and time permitting, I will vet your request and then read it. Now, when you do that, don't write me an autobiography, okay? Make it short and sweet, get to the point. Okay, from that, let's go to one. This is an important question for Mr. Fuller. This comes from Mo Blevy. He says this, if I pronounce his name right. He says, ask Mr. Fuller, why is killing the most powerful tool the white supremacists use?
Well, killing is really not the most powerful tool. It is, if you divide it by two, it's killing plus deceit, because their chief weapons are deception, and when they can't dominate and mistreat people through deception, then they go to direct violence, and that direct violence will take in killing. Mm-hmm. In other words, if I can't fool you, I'm talking to you and I'm stroking you and I'm shaking your hand and I'm smiling in your face and whatnot, and at the same time I'm mistreating you. I'm breaking treaties and contracts that we have. I'm making them more confusing, because confusion is a form of power. If I can confuse you to my satisfaction, and you don't know that you're being confused, or that you are confused, and you're listening to me, and that I'm the one doing the confusing, I dominate you. So the chief weapon of a racist is confusion through deception. So I keep fooling you and fooling you. Now, if you catch on to the fact that I am deceiving you, that I'm cheating you all the time and smiling in your face all the time while I'm cheating you, then you get angry. Now, when you get angry and I want to continue my power over you, now I have to resort to violence, and the violence might include killing. So it's deceit plus violence. However, deception itself is a form of violence. Anytime someone is fooling you to your detriment, that is, you are being violated. That's a form of violence. But that's indirect violence. And in the textbook for victims of racism, the book that I have, I say that deception is indirect violence. It's indirect. The direct violence is when they actually pull a gun or take out a sword.
Okay. All righty. 1-877-932-9766 is the number that you can call to get in contact with the show. And also you can email me by doing this, 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and I will vet it and I will read it to Mr. Fuller to have him answer your questions. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1, you are on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. What is your question?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Yes.
I recently purchased the book. I'm just covering the first couple of pages. I literally got the book a couple of days ago. This is the textbook, and my first question, or what interested me towards finding out more about Mr. Fuller and his work was actually listening to a radio show on YouTube, and certainly it struck my curiosity and struck my interest, because this is the type of discussion about racism that nobody really wants to have. So to get to my question, Mr. Fuller, I just would like to ask two things. One is, with the textbook, or with the way that you put it into perspective, how do you see the future when it comes to race relations, or when it comes to the development of people of color who are non-white? And also, how do you feel about television in general?
All righty. Mr. Fuller?
Well, I see the future as being what it is. I mean, when you start talking about the future, or anyone just looks into the future is a matter of what people do from moment to moment. There's always a future, and that is the very next breath that you take. That's a part of the future. So it comes down to what are people actually doing. Well, people usually do what they're thinking about. And so everyone has been orchestrated to think in support of the system of white supremacy since its inauguration, since it was first established. And so you have a world now that is dominated by people who believe in mistreatment of people based on color, and they are called racists and or white supremacists. and you have the victims of it. And we are locked into that. The white supremacist culture is white supremacy. And the victim culture is being victims of white supremacy. And that's the non-white people of the planet. So we're just in lockstep. And that'll just go on and on and on and on, just like a building. Any building that you see, I mean, standing on the street, or any tree that you see there by the sidewalk, anything that's already in place, it'll stay in place until someone decides, well, we need to replace it with something better. Now, that decision will have to mean something concrete, so you'll have to know what that something better is. So what would be better than racism? A system based on racism, mistreatment of people based on color. Well, that would be, theoretically and constructively, a system of justice. So it would just stay in place and stay in place and stay in place into infinity, just like a rock sitting on the moon. It'll just sit there for millions of years. It's not going to move until something moves it. So the victims of racism are the best candidates for change. So they'll just simply say, we're tired of doing the same thing the same way all the time. Because if you look at what we call black people's culture, and you look at the word culture, culture is just what you do from one minute to the next. Whatever you're doing from one minute to the next, that's your culture. And if you're a black person doing it, that is black culture. So black people have to get out of the habits that we have established. We got some terrible habits. Why are they terrible? Because they accommodate the system of racism. They're designed to do that. And so all we do is just react to what the racists do in every area of activity. The only thing that black people, truth be told, do on our own, and I don't think we really think seriously about this, and I keep talking about it, because it took me some time to discover what do black people actually do on their own when nobody's around, and we really start thinking on our own about what we really want to do more than anything else. Because what you want to do is what you're going to be trying to do. So what is it that black people want to do more than anything else that they ever want to do? Truth be told. And the answer came to me really just a few years ago in a direct response to that question. What is it that the average black person on this planet really wants to do when they are not really what you call hungry or thirsty or had, when you had enough sleep? Now you want to do something. What is it we want to do more than anything else? What we really want to do more than anything else is just enough to impress another black person.
Wow.
Truth be told. And
wow.
We need to think about that, because that is a very shallow way of looking at this universe.
Mm. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept here on the world's greatest radio station across the nation and around the world. That is talktainmentradio.com. That's radio the way it should be heard. You mentioned before we answer his second question about replacing the habits or the bad habits. What do you replace the habits with?
The system of justice, because the system of racism is a system of non-justice. So the first thing you want to replace the system of racism with, which is nothing but mistreatment of people based on color, is a system where no person is mistreated. That would be the definition of justice. I had to make up a definition of justice because there is no legal definition for justice. A lot of people may not know that. I didn't know it until 1994. There's no legal definition for the word justice. So I made up one, a compensatory definition, and I have it in the book, at least the word guide. I call it broadly balance between people, which is what we don't have. So if you get justice, you will have that balance. But breaking it down even further, or even explaining it better, it's guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, as part one. Part two, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, you do that on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis. If it's 10 people in a room, and you say, is anybody in this room being mistreated? Well, it might be one or two people might hold up their hands, or all 10 might hold up their hands and say, oh, yes, I'm being mistreated all the time, on the job, everywhere. I mean, people just trying to figure out a way to mistreat me, or they are actually mistreating me. And every move I make, I get mistreated. When I go to make a loan, I get mistreated. When I go to buy a car, I get mistreated. When I walk down the street, there are some flashing lights that come up, and people jump out, and they start mistreating me. Okay, so you pick out the person who is being mistreated the most. That's the logical process. Mm-hmm. You always follow the logic. Say, oh, well, William back there, in the third chair, sitting back there, it looks like he's got a long story of mistreatment. So we'll start looking into William's problems. In other words, the whole idea is to guarantee that nobody's mistreated. So you start with the person who is being most mistreated in a practical sense. That's on a job, anything else. Start with the person who is getting the most mistreatment, okay? Because everybody might say they're mistreated, but you start with the person who is being mistreated the most. That's the person who is hurting most. You do that when you call an ambulance. That's why people pull over. Everybody's hurting that's on the highway. They're late for work and all like that, and they're late for picking up the baby from the babysitter and all like that. But everybody pulls over and lets the ambulance through because the assumption is that wherever that ambulance is going, that person is hurting the most. We understand that when it comes to an ambulance and a siren, but we don't seem to understand that in what we do every day right there on the job.
On the job, yeah.
And et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now the second part of his question had something to do with television.
Television, yes.
Yes.
Oh, you look at television. You look at everything. You look at the birds like I did this morning. I looked out the window and watched the birds for a little while. And I thought about, now, what are those birds doing? They're being motivated. Being motivated by what? By whatever created birds. And why did that bird fly from that limb to the other limb? And then sat there for at least 5 minutes and then took off to parts unknown. Now, the bird knows what it's doing. I don't. But that bird is being motivated to do something that's going to be in one of what two categories? Something constructive or something non-constructive. And so you wonder about everything. So looking at television, you say, okay, what is this program really about? And after I finish looking at it for an hour, did I learn anything? And if I did, was it constructive or was it non-constructive? Because it's going to be in one of those two categories. There's nothing in between. And that's in everything that's going on around you.
Okay. All righty. Thank you for your call, caller number one. Okay, let's go to line number two. Line number two, what is your call, or question rather, for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.?
Yeah. Seems protests are once again a popular thing to do. Protest movements. It goes back, of course, to the not guilty or non-indictments of Mike Brown and Eric Garner, and now look lightly. All these different cases we've seen over the past 6 months to a year. And it was recently revealed that European billionaire George Soros was the one who had funded the whole Black Lives Matter movement, which people, even in the early days, questioned, where did this start? Who's leading this movement? And when that was revealed, I think a lot of people, and particularly even the black media, just bypassed it, gave it no attention, but it has come out. And that, I think, poses an interesting question, which I would like Fuller to discuss. But my second part to that is, in addition to this popular resurgence of protest movements, we're seeing the 50th anniversary. We all know it's the 50th anniversary of Selma, and it's coming up this weekend. We had the movie. We had all the different talk about it, and this coming week. It's all going to culminate this weekend in the official 50th anniversary with a big concert, a lot of celebrities, a lot of civil rights people, et cetera, converging down in small Selma, Alabama, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of a celebration. So the second part to that question is, what is the be gained by commemorating past protest marches and celebrations. What does that say about us? I mean, just bluntly as you can put it, what does that say about us when we're still celebrating something that happened years ago, and there's clearly been no progress since that time, in addition to the first part, which is about George Soros, or anyone, for that matter, who has the financial means to finance movements which we think are of our own doing.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Well, I am, according to what I've written, I'm not qualified to criticize anything that victims of racism do that they think should be done in order to end racism and replace it with justice, no matter what my personal opinion is. I'm not qualified to make statements against what that person is doing. Why? Because of something that I have written in the codification, the counter-racist codification concept, and that is that every victim of racism has what I call, I made it up, VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. That's VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. And what is that qualification? Every black person is qualified to say whatever he or she wants to say about his or her victimization of racism, by the system of white supremacy. They're qualified just by being a victim. Just like a prisoner of war, they're qualified to talk about their victimization in any way that they choose to express it, or in any way that the white supremacists allow them to express it. So if they want to demonstrate in the street for the 20th time, I cannot say anything against that because I'm not qualified. Why? Why is it that I'm not qualified? Because I'm still a victim. No one has overcome racism, so no one really knows what will work. There's no such thing as an expert on the system of white supremacy, except whom? The white supremacists themselves.
Excuse me, Mr. Fuller, you just said that you don't know what would work. Then how do you know that justice would work?
How did I know that? What?
How do you know that the system, a system of justice will work? If you just said you don't know what will work.
Okay, in answer to the question, no, I'm saying I haven't proven it.
Oh,
you know
okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But in answer to the question, I believe the system of justice would work because the system of justice is just the opposite. See, here's where the logic comes in. All mathematics is about logic. That's a mathematical deduction. If the system of racism is about non-justice, then justice would be in racism.
Okay.
And replace it with non-mistreatment of people and giving people what they need that is of constructive value.
Okay, so then the second part of his question about the marches, in particular Selma, the celebration or whatever it is that's going on in Selma coming up. How would you address that? I mean, is that good for us? And thank you for your call, caller.
Well, and also George Soros.
And George Soros. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's what I don't know because, see, I have to wait for the results. So you always go by, if we follow the logic, and everything that I've written is about following logic. If you follow the logic, everything in the universe is about cause and effect. So if I demonstrate, and then after the demonstration, I see that nothing changes, then I need to go back and examine why was I demonstrating? Because the whole point for doing it was to change what is to what things should be. So I'll just, after every demonstration, I make an assessment. It's just like cutting wood. I mean, if you get out there and chop wood all day, at the end of the day, you want to see some chopped wood. That was the whole purpose for chopping. So it's a matter of looking for results. RESULTS. And that's what you go by. I had an old sergeant, he taught me a lot, a black sergeant back in 1957 when I was wearing a uniform of the military. And he said, Fuller, there's one thing I notice about you. You're always talking about how hard you've been working. I don't ever want to hear that again. Don't tell me how hard you have been working. There's nothing unique about hard work. He says, show me the result. Now get out of here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I didn't like that, but he was right on point. Results is what it's all about.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Now, concerning George Soros, you're saying that you don't have enough information or you don't really know or you really can't address that. He can write or fund whatever he wants to fund. And as far as the celebrations concerning the marches on Selma, you need to wait to see what kind of results that are going to be produced, whether they're going to be constructive or non-constructive?
Yes, but I can't criticize because that's an effort.
Okay.
And we're all making efforts, or should be anyway.
Okay.
Because no one has figured out what to do about racism. You've had presidents come and go. You've had emperors come and go, kings come and go. You've had wars fought. You've had marches and demonstrations. But everybody's still wringing their hands. This thing called racism, my goodness, what do you do about it? And everybody says, well, let's do something. It's better than doing nothing. But so far, it's still here. And it's still just as solid as it ever was, regardless of the cosmetics that's been put on the top of it.
Wow. That's really interesting, an interesting, way to look at that. I myself have not looked at that, but I do understand the point about it being whatever it is, either it's going to be constructive or non-constructive. And before we go to break, can you speak to your book and how we can get it and the name of your book?
The basic title is the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, those words mean nothing. They're explained within the book itself, and then they'll begin to mean something, hopefully. But there is a subtitle, or you might say a corresponding title, more explicit title, Textbook Workbook for Thought, Speech, and/or Action for Victims of White Supremacy. White supremacy is racism. Racism is white supremacy. And you can get the book, the basic book, and an additional word guide, either one or the other or both, by going to producejustice.com. That's like in product, producejustice.com, because that should be the aim of what we all should be doing, trying to produce a product called justice. So that's producejustice.com. And the books are addressed to individual persons and what they can do each and every day. And that's what some of the questions I try to answer in that way.
Yes.
Right here on this program.
Yes.
What the individual person can do, because you're with yourself more than you're with anybody else.
Now, there's, as far as you know, people won't have any problem ordering the book now. There was the little problem before, but you got that straightened out?
Yes. There was a glitch in the ordering, and the books weren't available. The basic book wasn't available. So now that's been straightened out for the time being.
And the textbook is available also. Workbook.
Both books are available now.
At producejustice.com.
Producejustice.com.
Okay, and that's where you need to get it, right there. Not any place else, as some people have been trying to go online to other. No, don't do that.
Yes, and some people have been selling books at what I would call a very exploitative price. The books are high enough as it is.
Yes.
I'm trying to get the price down, and some people are selling the books for as much as $100.
No.
But go to producejustice.com.
All righty. TalkTameAtRadio.com. Check us out on WCRS FM 98.3 Wednesday and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. Download TalkTameAtRadio.com app to your cell or tablet. We go where you go. Radio, the way it should be heard. Stay right there. We have more of your calls and a few more questions on the greatest station in the nation and around the world. That's TalkTameAtRadio.com.
TalkTainmentRadio.com is the premier internet radio platform offering 40-plus talk radio-style programs professionally produced, optimized for online distribution, featuring Columbus, Ohio on-air personalities. TalkTainmentRadio.com offers listeners diverse programming options covering topics such as arts and culture, love, life and relationships, technology, religion, paranormal activities, local and national politics, women's issues, alongside health and wellness. Listeners can access their favorite TalkTainmentRadio.com programs free of cost through the website. Download the TTR app to your cell phone and you can take us wherever you go. We have programs on demand to fit your schedule through our podcast. The address is TalkTainmentRadio.com.
Do you own property? Are you considering a seller financing option? Do you know the latest laws and regulations impacting seller financing? The National Real Estate Investors Association is working on these issues and has information available for those considering this option at nationalreia.com. That's www.nationalreia.com.
We can give you a new heart.
We can help you walk again.
We can perform brain surgery.
We can treat a sore throat.
We can bring life into the world.
We can work so many miracles, but the one thing we cannot do is read your mind.
When you communicate with your doctor,
when you ask us more questions,
you reduce your risk of suffering a medical mistake.
Tens of thousands of lives are lost every year due to medical mistakes.
The healthcare community is working on it, but you can help.
Please, open up. Ask more questions.
What are the side effects?
When should I expect my test results?
Will this medication interact with my other prescriptions?
We can't answer if you don't ask.
Help reduce your risk.
Questions are the answer.
Learn the 10 questions you must ask. Visit www.ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, and the Ad Council.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. I encourage you to learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
Brought to you by Autism Speaks, the Ad Council, and TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
Goodwill is a global social services enterprise and the leading nonprofit provider of job training programs and career services in the United States and Canada. To pay for its program, Goodwill sells donated clothes and other household items in more than 2,700 stores and online at shopgoodwill.com. Goodwill uses the revenue earned from these sales to fund job training, employment placement services, and other community programs. The goal of the campaign is to increase goods donations to Goodwill, inspire an emotional connection to the Goodwill brand, and to elevate preference for Goodwill.
Supporting minority education. I'm Sean Booker, dammit, from The Melting Pot. I'm here to tell you that as the mother of a high school senior, I know due to financial circumstances, many of America's deserving minority students do not have access to a college education. Since 1944, the United Negro College Fund has sought to provide one. Since 1972, the beginning of this campaign, UNCF has helped more than 300,000 talented students earn a college degree. I'm Sean Booker, dammit. Give a helping hand.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Go ahead. Make my day.
You got the power.
All righty. Welcome back to the world's greatest radio station, the greatest station in this nation, across this country and around the world. That is talktainmentradio.com. Radio the way it should be heard. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am the host, or co-host, actually, and my name is Mr. Bobby. And we're talking about racism, which is white supremacy. And if you'd like to chime in, we will try to get you on. Phone lines are jammed, but we will try to get you in. That number is 1-877-932-9766. And if you can't get in there, then you can also Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Now, I may not be able to read your question this week. I know Ms. Shayala Peace, she just emailed me a nice question, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it this week. But if I do not, trust me, I will get to it on the next week. So hopefully we will get that. Okay, let's go to line number 3. Is that it? Okay, line number 3. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr.?
Is that me?
That would be you.
Okay, thank you. Hey, just wanted to ask Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, towards the production of justice, is it necessary for black people and or non-white people to like each other?
Ooh.
To like each other?
To like each other.
The word L-I-K-E?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely not. If we waited on that, we'd be waiting forever. Because the system is not even designed to have black people like each other. Not to say anything about love. You hear a lot of stuff about black love and whatnot. That's non-existent. You can't have love in the system of white supremacy. That doesn't compute at all. So you have to get the mechanics down. And then you have set the seeds. You have planted the seeds where you can get this liking and this love. You're not going to get it in the system of white supremacy. The system of white supremacy is designed for hostility. And we have all been poisoned by that. So that clears up that mystery, I think. And that is, no, I mean, you are supposed to be able to function with people that you don't care about emotionally at all. Because this thing about having it already in existence, talking about, you hear black people sometimes say something that's absolutely false, and that is talking about this black love that exists. You can't have love in the system of white supremacy. Why? Because what does the word love mean? See, we toss that word around loosely, very loose. So it's meaningless. It means absolutely nothing. It's non-existent. But what is it in essence about what it should be? The word love, and I have this in the word guide, and the word justice are one and the same. You cannot have one without the other. So since you can't have justice, going by the computer now, going by logic, you can't have justice and white supremacy in the same universe at the same time. Therefore, you can't have love either, since love and justice are one and the same. And what is justice? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, no black person can guarantee that.
All righty. Thank you so much for your question there. Okay, let's go overseas here. Joansley Garcia. Mr. Garcia writes, Mr. Fuller, why is it necessary to ask someone who physically appears as an albino or Caucasoid if he or she identifies with being classified as white? Explanation: if you're living in Europe, for example, which is the birthplace of the white race, then it is a no-brainer to ask that question. Also, it seems to me that it will bring about more confusion for a non-white person because the white supremacist main activity and existence is based upon dishonesty and deception, which brings me to another question. Isn't it better to assume, approach, and treat every white person on this planet from the first initial contact as a white supremacist until proven innocent on a continuing basis in contrary to being innocent until proven guilty? Thank you.
Excellent question. Now, I guess what is being asked is, what do you do if you are a non-white person and you encounter a white person for the first time? That's where we need a code, which is something we don't have. We simply make the assumption that that white person, if he or she is able to be a racist, is one. So you just simply approach with caution. But you do that with courtesy, maximum courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let anybody be more courteous than you. And then you interact with the person in the most constructive manner that you know how. The most constructive manner. Not approach with hostility. You wait on that, because if the person is a racist, the hostility is going to come. This is how you'll find out who this person is. But you just approach with caution. That's all. Just like approaching a stranger. I mean, you know, back in the old hinterland days, you're a farmer. I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you haven't seen another person around there for years, and you see another person come down the road for the first time in the last 3 years. You don't know who the person is, so when the person approaches you, you used to say back when, usually among country folks, well, howdy, stranger, and so you approach with that particular disposition.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep that up consistently until the person begins to show the hostility. Then you say, now my suspicions of this person are being confirmed, maybe. But you just keep watching the person, because you have already concluded that in a world dominated by white supremacy, which means mistreatment of people based on color, any white person who is able to be a white supremacist may be one. You don't know for sure, but you always look at that white person, because the white person is able to be one, that this white person may be a white supremacist.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I'm just going to bide my time until I am convinced, oh, yes, this is another one of them.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Because why? Based on what they do and what they say. It's not having a constructive result.
Okay. Before we go to the next caller, Shay Peace, Buddha, I lost your question, so Gmail me again so I can have it, so I can ask Mr. Fuller the questions. Okay, let's go to line number one. Okay, line number one, you are on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on TalkTeamRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept. 1-877-932-9766 is the number you call, or 7MrBobby@gmail.com, and we will try to get you in. Go ahead, line number one.
Good morning to you and Mr. Fuller. I have two questions as far as racism and white supremacy and how the system is. The first question is, are blacks more confused through deception once blacks campaign, run for their city or state government offices and win? Because once they get into the office, they appear to not to execute what they say they would do for their people. And the second question right quick is there a generation gap why some blacks will vote for white when they're running for office?
Okay.
For their governments and not for their own black race? And you all keep up the good work. And I want to ask you something, Mr. Bobby, or you all, do you all remember President Obama when he was campaigning for office for president? And he did make a statement, my aunt and uncle, they can remember that, where he had said that he was going to push for universal health insurance. So you all keep up the good work, and we're going to get your books. Take care, and God bless you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fuller, you care to answer?
Somewhere I lost the question because I was trying to keep up.
Yeah.
But it seems like, it
was about blacks or getting into office, not keeping their promises, and then that some black people voting for white people, I guess. I think that was the question.
Oh, well, black people getting into what you call elected office and not keeping their promises, that's what you expect. See, that's a part of the code. You always expect that. Why? Because they can't a black person cannot promise anything who has been elected in a system of white supremacy unless the white supremacists say that I'm going to back up your promise. So it's always a guess. The black person may have the best of intentions, and most of them do. But in a system of white supremacy, the white supremacists said, I know you promised those black people this, that, and the other, all your relatives and cousins and whatnot, but I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to let you do it. So forget about that, boy. Forget about that, gal. You ain't getting it. And so you go out there and explain it any way you want to. But anything that you are going to give them, you got to get it from me. You have nothing on your own.
Mm-hmm.
You are subject to me. Hey, wake up. You're in the system of white supremacy. So no black person on this planet can promise anything to any other black person without the white supremacists saying, oh, yes, I'll see to it that you can make good on that promise, because anything that you have, you got to get it from me, and if you don't have it, you can't give it to them.
All righty. Thank you for answering that question. Okay. And thank you, Shah Peace Be Allah, if I pronounced it correctly. Thank you for writing me back in, because I did want to get that question in. Says, she says, Mr. Fuller, under this system of white supremacy, I don't see white people or people who are not being mistreated, including those who don't know they're being mistreated, wanting to produce justice. So my question is, what is the prerequisite to justice? In other words, what plus or times what equals justice? Thank you, Shay. Peace be Allah.
Well, I gave the definition, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. And the other part is guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. We've never had a definition for justice, so I had to make up that one. Now we got something we can aim for. And I gave an illustration of that earlier in this program, about the 10 people in a room, with someone needing help. You start right there. This is where you start. We have never had a definition for justice. It's just been a slogan. We want justice. And someone says, well, what is it? And we just look blank.
But
we just say, well, there's something out there. Well, something out there, that's not concrete. That's not scientific. We haven't been scientific. Science means cause and effect.
Cause and effect. But she asked a very interesting point here, which I've been running into. She said, including those who do not know that they are being mistreated. Well, how do you address that?
People that don't know they are being mistreated, you don't make an effort to point it out. You just wait, because you have to. Because if you go up to a person and try to tell that person they are being mistreated, they are being cheated, that they were mistreated and cheated before they were born, the person simply doesn't know. Lots of people don't know that. It's just like you've been paying a certain amount of money on your rent. And from day one, you were paying twice as much as you were supposed to. So when you come up and tell that person 10 years later, you've been paying double rent. And you shouldn't have been doing this right from the beginning. That person might say, get out of my face. You think I'm stupid? I don't want to talk to you. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm paying the same rent that I did 10 years ago when I moved in. And now you're coming up here with some story about I'm paying double or something. That doesn't even make sense. Get out of my face. That would be the reaction of the average person.
Okay.
Simply because they are used to doing what they are used to doing. If you're born a slave, you don't know anything about slavery. Of course, you say, hey, I'm just a hired hand. I'm working. Everything. What's the problem with you? And you say, hey, you're a slave. Your ancestors, before you were born, were made slaves. So you were born in slavery.
Mm-hmm.
You're on a plantation. You're being mistreated. The person might want to hit you with that hoe or that rake that they got in their hand,
Mm-hmm.
or that machete or whatever it is, and tell you to get out of there. You're nothing but a troublemaker. So you don't try to convince people that they are being mistreated. You tell them what the setup is and let them figure it out for themselves.
Okay. That's a good question, because I definitely have been running into that, and I think I can feel her. I've been a little frustrated about people who just can't see it, and maybe won't even entertain it. But anyway, that was a very good question. Before we go to the phone lines, I do have another question from Keith Julian Lee. He says, can you ask Mr. Fuller to give an example of how I can use the 5th and 14th Amendment if I'm fired from my job? Also, to do this, do I need to hire an attorney? Mr. Fuller?
Well, it's been my experience that, first of all, the best I can tell you, the worst thing that can happen is that you try to do it after you've been fired. You start to do that work before you get fired by raising questions. And don't make any accusations. This is for everybody who's still on the job. I don't know what you do after you get off the job. You probably will need an attorney to get back. But you will still use the 5th and 14th Amendment because, to my knowledge, when it comes to in the Northwestern Hemisphere, the Constitution has the 5th and the 14th Amendment, and that's supposed to be the law that governs all other laws, and that's sort of like the core of the Constitution for people of color. So you always use the 5th and 14th Amendment. Now, the 5th is about due process, which means going about doing everything the correct way. That's what the term due process means. And the 14th means equal protection, meaning were you treated the same as everybody else in the same circumstances, the same type of scenario, the same type of thing that happened? Was anybody in the whole history of that place treated the same as you were treated when it came down the pike? And these two things have to go together, both the 5th and the 14th Amendment. And you do use them. They're very short. You can look them up. They're relatively short. The 5th Amendment is about compensation also, and about due process, which is, hey, did you go about doing it the correct way? But you don't accuse anybody. That's another thing. This is very important. If you accuse anybody of doing anything, even when you're pretty well sure that the accusation is accurate, don't do it. Resist that temptation. Ask for an investigation based on the 5th and 14th Amendment.
And quickly, do they need to hire an attorney?
Stay away from trying to hire an attorney. That's why I try to use under compensatory law.
Okay.
You know, that I've been on jobs, and that's what I did.
Okay.
I used the 5th and 14th Amendment because that's what the attorney that you hire is going to use.
Okay. I got you. Okay, let's go to line number 2. Okay, line number 2. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Question narrative. White supremacy, racism. Is this as a, there's some people that say that it's an elite, an educated elite, a secret society and so forth. And then they say, like Elder Dick Gregory says, you think the Ku Klux Klan could design all this? And my question narrative is, do you see that it is more than a system, right? That it is a brain, that is a core brain that institutes sociological experiments like Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, that they orchestrate these situations that come about.
Okay. Thank you for your call. Mr. Fuller?
Well, in order to understand the system of white supremacy, you take in all of the areas of activity. And what is a white supremacist? A white supremacist is any white person that believes in dominating, mistreating a person based on color. And any white person that does that has instantly, within the system of white supremacy, become one of the most powerful people in the world. They are among the most powerful because that makes them a part of that group that runs anything that's important that's going on this planet that has to do with non-white people. That person instantly becomes one of them, and that's a lot of power.
A lot of power.
Because they are the smartest and most powerful people on the planet. Anytime you're a member of that club, not some person that's just walking around with a robe on and a pointed hat and with some cutouts for the eyes and whatnot. We call them Ku Klux Klansmen. That's what black people usually associate with white supremacy. The white supremacist is any white person who is able to practice white supremacy and who does so by mistreating a non-white person, just by telling a non-white person something that's not true. Just on that alone, any white person that walks up to you today and tells you anything that's not true, that's a white supremacist right there. Just on that alone. Because that's one of the worst things that can happen to a non-white person. Is for a white person to tell them something that's not so.
Okay. Thank you for that call. Shaw Peace B, by the way, is Mel. Thank you, Shaw Peace. I apologize, but thank you for straightening me out. We've got a question from Lynette Rogers. It says, hello, could you ask Mr. Fuller this? Is the accumulation of wealth/money for non-white people important or necessary to counter racism and or to produce justice? Then it says, thanks from Michelle in Michigan. Ms. Fuller?
Say that again.
Says, is the accumulation of wealth, money for non-white people important or necessary to counter racism and or to produce justice?
Oh, you try to accumulate as much money as you can legitimately. Don't rob and steal now. Don't rob and steal. On a job, get out of that habit that we have been taught to try to steal what we can, or get out on the street and carjack somebody. No, get away from that. The white supremacists themselves are robbers and thieves. They rob the whole world. They rob people. When you enslave people, that's robbery. That's rape. That's theft. They sneak up on people and grab them and throw some ropes over their head and drag them off somewhere. That's what you call rape. That's the definition of rape, carrying away by force. And that's robbery. You're taking the person away from their means of being able to take care of themselves and whatnot. Now you're going to have them do your bidding. So they did millions of people this way. So they're the greatest robbers and thieves in the world. So when black people come along and imitate that by going to the airport to carjack somebody, they are experts at that. And you're not going to get rich doing that nonsense, and stop doing it. That's one of the 10 stops in the compensatory code.
But we can't accumulate money, though.
But let accumulate money in a constructive manner to the extent that they will let you do that. And when you accumulate this money, use this money only for constructive purposes.
Okay.
Don't use that money to do what most black people do, or many black people do, and that's strut around trying to impress other black people. That's a toxic way of handling money.
Yeah, you did say that in another program. Quickly, to your book title, the workbook, word guide, and where can we get it at?
You can get it by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. That's the source for getting the basic book and the additional word guide. And producejustice.com.
And once again, the name and the title of that book and the workbook?
Well, you'll see it on the screen when it comes up, and that's a textbook workbook for victims of racism.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, thank you so much for chiming in. Yes, sir. And callers, we thank you too. Thank you for calling and asking your question, and emailers too. We thank you too. If I didn't get to your question, which I only had one left, we'll do it next week. Anyway, talktainmentradio.com, the world's greatest radio, the greatest station across the nation and around the world. Radio, the way it should be heard.
Listening to the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com.